Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to let it settle down as people enter the room. We've got people coming in thick and fast. We've got quite a lot of people joining us this morning, so I'll just give it a moment or two just to allow everyone into the room before we get going today. All right, I'll just give it a couple more seconds, start to settle down. Okay, in the interest of time, I'll get us going. So yeah, hello and welcome to today's webinar on the 12th edition of Prosci's Best Practices Research. I'm Reese and I'll be leading the engagement in today's webinar. Please note, although this webinar is scheduled for an hour, it could run over depending on the extent of interaction and questions that we receive. The webinar slides will be available in the chat pane in a few moments' time once I hand over to the presentation team. If you can't see them, don't panic. It may be down to the fact that if you're using the Zoom browser version, you can't access files in the chat. But don't worry about that because we send an email out early part of next week with a copy of the slides. So if you don't get them today, rest assured you will get them latest early part of next week. We don't have any polls today, so if you've come to any of our webinars before, you'll be familiar with our poll everywhere. We run some polls normally during the webinar. No polls today, but we still want your participation. So the webinar is still fully interactive. So feel free to either use the Q&A pane or the chat pane to ask your questions or to share your thoughts and opinions. And we still really want that interaction despite the lack of polls today. So really do make use of that over the next hour. One thing to note, though, is that if you do use that Q&A pane or the chat pane, you need to make sure that if you do want to remain anonymous, to tick the box that you should see. So if you do want to remain anonymous when you're asking any questions or making any comments, the advice is to use the Q&A pane because that would allow you to tick a box to say, I want to remain anonymous. So if you use the chat or you don't tick that box, your name will be shared with the rest of the attendees. So just make a note of that. So yeah, very quickly, just a little bit of background about us. So if you are new to us, we're Prosci Europe. We were formerly known as CMC Partnership Global and Nexum. And for decades, we've been helping individuals and organizations to develop their change skills. Our mission is helping you to accelerate the delivery, adoption, and usage of the new ways of working. CMC Global and Nexum initially came together as one organization at the back end of last year, but in April this year, we then became part of the Prosci family and are now known as Prosci Europe. And also Prosci Singapore, if you're joining us from Singapore this morning. Prosci Europe is the sole provider of Prosci change management training conducted in person and virtually across several territories, including UK and Ireland, Italy, the Nordics, and Scandinavia, amongst others. We also offer private training, which can be facilitated globally at a venue of your choice anywhere in the world. So for more information regarding our range of services, continue to head to either cmcpartnership.com or nexon.eu at the moment, as we're still going through that transition. But if you'd like to know more about how we can work with your organization in your various options, again, either head to either website or feel free to direct message me in the chat and we can follow up with you after today's webinar. So getting to today's webinar. Our first presenter today is Imogen Parnham-Kenny. Imogen is a Prosci executive instructor and a change management consultant at Prosci Europe. Imogen supports changes both externally at customers and internally at Prosci Europe with particular experience in enterprise capability building, mergers and acquisitions, and IT change. Our second presenter today is Michelle Stryker. Michelle is a Prosci certified practitioner with experience within the travel, education, and non-profit sectors. She is a team lead for the training managers at Prosci Europe Plus and co-delivers our TTT programs and supports delivery of the 3-day practitioner program and our various 1-day workshops. So with that, I'll hand over to Imogen to introduce you to today's webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Good morning and possibly even good afternoon and good evening to those of you that are joining us today. So yeah, as Reece said, we are going to be taking a look at the best practices in change management 12th edition today. So I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. Where I've brought you to here is the electronic access that I have for the best practices in change management 12th edition. So this is based inside my Prosci portal, and it's based inside Research Hub as well. So the one thing that I will say about this, anyone that has become a practitioner within the last year, you should have access to this. As part of having access to Research Hub, you get access to this research along with all of Prosci's other kind of deep dive studies as well. So I'm going to give you a bit of an intro to the research itself, and then in a moment I'll be handing over to Michelle to take us into looking a little bit more in what you can see as the final element of the left-hand menu on my screen, which is the interactive insights. So to first talk a little bit about this, how to navigate it, you've got two options. You can either use this left-hand menu that you can see here, or you can just see at the bottom of my screen, there's a next button as well. So the left-hand menu, it kind of feels like you're flicking through the research a little bit more. You're flicking to the sections that you want to look at, whereas the next button acts almost as though you're turning the page. So as you can see, 25 years of Prosci research. So the first longitudinal study took place in 1998, and this is the 12th study that Prosci has conducted. So it marks 25 years of research, and you can see that the 102 participants in that initial effort shared their insights. We'll look in a few moments' time at how many have come together to share their insights for this latest edition of the research. So as I mentioned, it's a longitudinal study, which means that the same core questions are asked repeatedly over a number of years, and that helps to identify trends in the research. So you've got that advantage, as well as some additional questions being added over time as well. So it does take a really long time to write up the analysis, quite honestly, of this huge amount of data that Prosci receives as part of this study. So what Prosci have done is that they've led with this interactive insights element that Michelle's going to show you around shortly, that's powered by Power BI. So it takes some of that data and starts to do some of that analysis work up front. Prosci have also added, within the last couple of months, I'd say, this current state of change management and measuring change success sets of analysis as well, that take a little bit more of a deeper dive, a bit more deeper focus into those areas. So I'm going to talk to you about those very shortly. As I said, this is a longitudinal study, so it focuses on 4 broad categories. I've got them written down here: current state of change management applications, roles in change management, and adapting and aligning change management as well. The 2023 study, it also included a new section which was defining success and metrics. If you're an alumni of the Prosci training, you can join our alumni webinar at the end of this month, so end of November 2023, where Kerry and Michelle will be talking a little bit more about that chapter in a bit more depth. So if I move on through, in fact, I've talked a little bit about this next section, so you can see we've got some of the study objectives there, which includes that description of what's included in the study. I also want to talk to you a little bit about this participant profile. So I think it's 102 we said took part in the original survey. We've now got 2,668 participants from truly across the globe, 101 countries. So really stretching out to across the globe to get this insight back. Here you can also see not only the individuals that took part, but also some descriptions around the organisations as well. Interestingly, at least certainly I find it interesting that nearly 2/3 of respondents are spending 50 to 100% of their time dedicated to change management. So I certainly find that interesting to understand who's reporting on some of this data as well. Just a note to pull out this one as well. So how we did this, bit of information from Prosci just about how the data was collected. So it was collected in February and March of this year, and there's a variety of ways that participants were found. And you can also see a little bit about the two types of data analysis that were completed on the research there. If I then click through, I'm also going to check what I've got on my notes as well. As I mentioned, again, this is a longitudinal study. So we've been able to track changes over time. So you can see we've got a list of the changes in the landscape, particularly the changes of note in the 2023 dataset. I just want to pull out a couple that I find of interest on here. That first up is that changing location of the CMO, so the Change Management Office. And what we've seen is that the Project Management Office has replaced HR as the most common location for the Change Management Office. And there has been a significant increase in change management offices being found in strategy, transformation, and in planning. So interesting to see that we're possibly seeing a lot more change practitioners hanging their hats off the work that our project management colleagues are doing in the PMO. The other element that I did want to pull out was this third bullet point here, that idea that we're tend to be seemingly doing less, our work with less budget, but more resource. So although the percentage of those respondents reporting, do have that dedicated budget, it went down. Those that are reporting that they have a dedicated resource focused on change management went up slightly. So possibly slightly encouraging that we're seeing more of a leaning towards ensuring that we've got dedicated resources, but possibly having to try and do that with a little bit less budget. The final one that I wanted to pull out on screen for you here was that final bullet point at the bottom. I just think this one's of interest as well. That idea of actively managing the portfolio. So we're seeing that the percentage of respondents who reported actively managing their portfolio and change increased from 38% to 43%. I think that's really encouraging. That really feels as though we are moving towards a more change mature world, a world where we can maybe manage our change saturation a bit better when we're considering what's happening in the portfolio overall. So personally, find that really encouraging to see in the data. Continuing on through, I'm going to move through into the current state of change management. So we've got this two sections to this, insights and trends. So if I click through into the insights, we've got three elements to the insights: the greatest contributors to success, greatest change management obstacles, and what to do differently on the next project. As might be expected, active and visible sponsorship still coming up as that #1 contributor to success. So that's where we're seeing that sitting at the top here. You can see as well, we've got those following on additional contributors to success, the top 7, and then you can see some additional contributors listed there below. You can also see the placement over time. So pretty much, as you can see, staying fairly similar to the 2019 study, just some swapping around of employee engagement and communication, and project management integration, and dedicated funding and resources. If we scroll down to take a look at those greatest change management obstacles, we're seeing insufficient stakeholder engagement and management coming out on top as the top obstacle. I'd really point you towards the analysis that's been done below here, the wording. So around the fact that stakeholder engagement and alignment are critical for successful change management. but they are challenging for a number of reasons, and that can be especially seen in large-scale organisational transformation. So we've got lots of individuals to engage with. Stakeholder engagement, mapping, commitment, alignment, and involvement take time and energy and are often overlooked. So recommendation, almost like a what to do differently next time. Ensure that you've got that opportunity to engage with stakeholders. And we're also seeing that resistance from stakeholders and a lack of buy-in can hinder change efforts, and leadership and sponsorship are essential for driving change. Not particularly surprising, considering we're seeing that element of active and visible sponsorship coming out on top. And also ensuring alignment and, in particular, resolving conflicting priorities. So a bit back to that idea of understanding what's going on in the wider portfolio. And then that pull-in of effective communication and collaboration across all stakeholders contribute to successful change outcomes. So some important points there, and some connections to other parts of the research that we're already seeing in those obstacles. If I continue scrolling down, you can see some of those other obstacles, and then I'm just going to talk a little bit about what to do differently on the next project. And in particular, that idea of bringing back up that stakeholders and sponsors again. There seems to be a theme in these top three elements. Involving key stakeholders and sponsors earlier is coming up as that what to do differently next time, possibly unsurprising. Also, what I like to see in here is this idea of building a change agent network and building that early. Basically doing things earlier, thinking about things earlier, the type of things that we're already talking about on training, thinking about keeping the end in mind. If I click through into the trends, you'll see that we've got, again, three sections to this, looking at internal trends in change management, challenges facing the discipline of change management, and expected discipline trends over the next 5 years. So if we dig into these a little bit, what I do find is that these top 4 internal trends, so we're seeing growing awareness of the need for change management, need for education and training on change management, adoption of a standard change framework with tools and templates, and incorporating change management into Agile. All 4 of those, hugely positive. I think that they're massive positives to take away from the fact that this is what's happening in the industry. We're seeing these 4 things coming out on top. I think they're really positive steps to be taking. We are seeing possibly some negatives, maybe slightly lower down, and that idea of lack of resources and difficulty measuring success. But certainly that difficulty of measuring success, there is some thoughts in this research about how you can do that. In terms of the challenges, resistance to change comes up as that top element. And interestingly, if you take a read of that description, you'll see that it's likely coming from a number of different angles. So the idea that culture is playing a role, but also lack of leadership buy-in and support, change fatigue, saturation. So it's that not only are we facing resistance, maybe to the change itself, but also there's other elements that are playing into that as well. Finally, the final bit that I just wanted to pull out for you in this section was that expected discipline trends over the next 5 years. Really positive to see that there is more emphasis on the human side of change. So the idea that employee engagement is going to be crucial for successful change management and also for organisational growth. And interesting to see that technology, particularly AI and digital tools, can be leveraged to improve engagement and communication. And we're seeing that metrics and measurement are going to be important for tracking that engagement and adoption. So back to the idea of measuring change success. One final section to show you then, which is that measuring change success section. I'm going to, as I've done with the previous ones, just give a brief overview to this. So I'll show you this, this top page here. I think that what's coming out of this research is just the importance of having alignment of what success looks like. I certainly talk about this when I lead any practitioner training, just that importance right up front to have alignment between our sponsors, our primary sponsor, any key stakeholders, about what good looks like, what success looks like, and ensuring that that everyone agrees on what that is. And to aid that, having metrics, having defined figures about what percentages we're expecting, say how much we're expecting people to save time, things like that, that can be hugely helpful. So there's some great thoughts in here, and I know that Michelle and Kerry are going to be getting into this section a little bit more at the end of this month with our alumni group. That's all that I've got for you in terms of the lead up, the kind of stuff that we've got in this left-hand menu up front. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Michelle to talk a little bit more about those interactive insights. Actually, I can see that there's some chat. Did we want to pause and I'll just check in with Reese? Is there any chats that we need to respond to?
No questions there. Just if anyone does have access to files in the chat, I have shared the executive summary. So if anyone wants to download the executive summary of the research, then yeah, you should be able to find that in the chat. If you can't access files in the chat, as I said at the start, we will also be emailing it early part of next week. So you will get access to it at some point.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you, Michelle.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Imogen. So I am here today to just show you around a little bit in that interactive report that Imogen has talked about briefly in the 12th edition research. So in the 12th edition research, Prosci really tried to sort of shift the emphasis from using research as a noun, research as something that you read or consume, to research as an action. So an action that you as a change practitioner can actually take. You take that research into your own hands and you can form it and you can, play around with it a little bit. So really moving away from reading to doing, which I find really exciting. A word of warning, once you get into that interactive report and into that research a little bit, it's really almost like going down a rabbit hole. You really find yourself, looking up an hour and a half later and thinking, wow, did I really just spend an hour and a half playing around with this interactive report? And the answer is yes, you did. So I am just going to share my screen. And this is what our best practices in change management 12th edition report looks like. So I'm going to just walk us through a couple of those sections that I find really valuable and of interest. So I'm also just going to look away a little bit to the left-hand side. My connection with the Power BI seems to be a little bit slow. So I just want to warn you from the beginning, the pages might take a second or two to load. So I apologize for that, but it has been like that since the beginning. So I'm not sure what else I can do about it. But yes, so I want to show you around a little bit in the research. So I'm going to start us off in the welcome section. So getting started and then welcome. And you will see that here you have a little bit of information on how to navigate through the 12th edition research report. So they've got some handy tips at the bottom: filter to focus, hover to uncover, and click to compare. And it will tell you exactly then what to do and how to navigate through the research. If you have access to this 12th edition research report, go and spend some time here in the welcome page and play around a little bit with the different icons and see what they can do for you. Okay, so you can either then navigate through using the right-hand side where you'll see that the information is being organized through different sections, or on the on the right-hand side here, where it's organized by different topics. So the topics are actually hidden in the sections here. So just for instance, if you have a look at the roles in change management, they have got sponsors, managers and supervisors, change agent networks, as well as consultants. So the information or the topics are exactly the same, whether you navigate on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side through the sections. Yeah, so I'm going to start us off by having a look at change management application, and we're going to click through to effectiveness and measurement. So I'm just looking to my left-hand side because I've got my second screen on the left. So effectiveness and measurement I thought was a good starting point for us. As we also very early on in the practitioner program, we touch on effectiveness and measurement by looking at the correlation between meeting or exceeding project objectives and the effectiveness of change management. Remember that we are 7 times more likely to meet or exceed our objectives when we do excellent change management, and then we also, with fair change management, we are 3 times more likely to meet or exceed our project objectives. And then the other ones that we talk about in the practitioner program, 71% of respondents come in or under budget with excellent change management, and 65% of respondents were on or ahead of schedule with excellent change management. I'm sure you guys all remember those statistics. Okay, so when I click through to effectiveness and change management, you'll see that you've got a couple of statements there. Managers effectively coached employees, leaders effectively managed resistance, etc. So when Prosci did the study, participants didn't simply just say that they did great change management. Participants didn't simply say that they met or exceeded their objectives. They actually had to answer these 12 questions or statements to the extent whether they agree, disagree, strongly agree, or strongly disagree with those statements. And then these were consolidated into what you see on screen here. So you can then play around a little bit with the information that you see here. So I'm firstly going to show you up at the top right-hand side, you can actually filter a little bit. So you can filter by region, you can filter by industry, and you can filter by number of employees. In the top right-hand side, you'll see as you start to filter that your participants or your respondents change a little bit. So in some of the searches I've done, I've ended up with only 2 respondents. So that really narrows it down depending on the different types of filters that you use. Okay, so remember just a little tip, once you start playing around with the research a little bit, this little eraser here, if you, from the beginning, when you go in for a new search, just make sure that you've cleared all of your filters. Otherwise, you might not end up with the right representation. Okay, so let's explore a little bit. So when we look at the third statement, leaders fulfilled their roles throughout the change, you'll see that 40% of respondents agreed and 38% of them disagreed. So if I click on this agree bar, you'll see that the change happens in all the other statements. So you can see then that this actually has a ripple effect through all the other 11 statements, in that where leaders fulfilled their roles throughout the change, change activities were customized to fit the change, there was efficient resources to implement change management, the change were reinforced effectively, and you can just go through all of them in turn and just see how that one answer actually filters through to all the others. And then if we just change it around a little bit, where leaders did not fulfill their roles throughout the change, and we click on that one, disagree, you'll see that the bars all change again. And then we see something interesting, that the change hasn't effectively been reinforced. The change management team didn't necessarily have the training and expertise etc. So it's, you know, once you start playing around with those parameters, the research really starts to get really interesting. You can also then, at the top right here, compare successful projects to unsuccessful ones. So if I click on projects that met or exceeded objectives, you'll see that in every single one of them, it shows that a clear and direct impact on meeting and exceeding objectives is there when managers effectively coach their employees, leaders effectively manage resistance, etc. And then if you click on partially met or failed objectives, you'll see that the reverse is true. Then the graphs change again. Okay, so that was, you can really go in there, play around a little bit by changing the different sections and parameters, changing the number of employees, looking at different industries and regions, etc. So you'll see if, for instance, if I just narrow it down a little bit, for instance, to Africa, let's have a look at the banking industry, and let's choose a mid-size organization. We are actually only down then to one respondent that fits all the criteria that we filtered down here. Okay, another part of the research that I found very valuable is something that we call in participants' words. So if I go into the current state of change management, and we have a look at that active and visible sponsorship that number one contributed to change success. And let me just clear those filters. There you go. All right, so the number one, the greatest contributor to change success, as Imogen also said earlier, it's still that active and visible executive sponsorship. And then what is really interesting here is what Prosci has done, this in participant words at the bottom. So participants were actually asked a question in the research: what were the greatest contributors to change success in your organization? And the in participant words is then the verbatim answers that the participants has given to that question. So you can really find some very interesting statements here. And you can also filter it by clicking on, if you want to have a look at what participants said specifically about active and visible executive sponsorship. Click on that and you'll see that this is what the participants specifically said about active and visible executive sponsorship. A sponsor driving the change, holding people accountable to expected behaviors, sponsor that was engaged and open to coaching, supportive sponsor, very active and engaging sponsor. So this really is some powerful words that you can include in a PowerPoint or a presentation to your sponsors to make sure that they know how important they are in driving the change success of your projects. So that was another thing that was really interesting to me. And then one more thing that I just want to show you guys is then this Me Search button. Okay, so the Me Search at the end, if you guys feel that after all of this, after you've walked through the interactive report, you still haven't quite gotten the answers that you were looking for, or you were just looking for something that's a little bit more tailored to your organization or your industry, for instance, you can use this Me Search function. So I'm just going to go through that quickly. So you've got under the Me Search, you've got something called Free Search, and then you've got some correlation graphs and some employee engagement distributions, stakeholder engagement and saturation, as well as some study questions. So the study questions are actually all the questions that participants were asked in this recent study. So they're all there if you want to go and have a look at what exactly they were asked. And they are also organized by topic. And then you have some graphs there that you can really, pull out some of the more interesting findings. I'd also just want to show you that by clicking on this little, you'll see all of them have got this little square block. If you hover over it, it says focus mode. So if you click on that, it will just open it and make it a little bit bigger. So excellent for using this in a presentation on change management, or why change management is important. Okay, so the focus mode block, and then it will open it up into a bigger screen for you. Okay, so you've got correlation graphs, you've got the study questions, and then we have something called research. And this is where you can then really play around a little bit with the research. Yeah, so I'm just going to have a look at an implementation of an ERP system, just for by way of explaining how the research works. So you are going to firstly see that this section of the research is divided into 3 areas. So you've got the context for change on the left-hand side. You've got your common change management best practices dimensions here, and then you've got an outcome section on the right-hand side. So the context for change, that's really just tell me a little bit about your organization, tell me a little bit about the project, and even tell me a little bit about the change practitioner. And you can play around with the different filters there. So your organizational attributes, you can have a look at number of employees. Do you want to have a look at by industry, country, region? You can really go crazy. So a project type, we want to have a look at the ERP implementation. Okay, so you can see that 9% of the projects that was brought to the study were actually enterprise resource planning implementations. And if I click on that, it's going to change the information just a little bit. Okay, so then I can go and really, get curious and get into the research a little bit. So let's see, if we want to have a look at organizations, what type of industries we're actually implementing ERP systems. We can see that, let's make it a little bit bigger, let's go into focus mode. Manufacturing was the biggest one, followed by the consulting industry, as well as educational services and the food and beverage industry as well. Okay, so manufacturing. And then we can also have a look at, say, for instance, resistance. So in this enterprise resource planning project implementation, who was the most resistant groups? And you can see there, it is then our mid-level managers. So you can really go in there, get curious, play around with the information in there quite a bit. Then you can then also up here filter then, of course, by region, by industry, as well as by the number of employees in the organization. So you'll see that for an enterprise resource planning implementation, we had 222 respondents completing the questionnaire on the research. Okay, so that was the research. So yeah, so as you can see, there really is, it is really a lot different than the 11th edition. So the 11th edition, definitely, if you want to read up on any of the topics, but the 12th edition, excellent if you want to play around with some information and really tailor that research to your organization and to your specific industry. So yeah, so that's a little bit of how the 12th edition interactive report works.
Fab, thanks, Michelle. We had a question through in the Q&A just asking about do we have access to these reports in the Prosci portal? Yeah, absolutely. You do have access to those. You have access to those so long as you have certified within the last year, or so long as you have renewed your portal subscription, so your subscription to Proxima research hub and knowledge hub within the last year as well. What I wanted to do was I personally really enjoyed getting into the interactive insights. Michelle, you were right if I dive into a couple of the topics that I found particularly enlightening for me as a change practitioner, someone who's doing actual change. Is that all right? Is that all right if I
Go for it, absolutely. Show us.
If I reshare my screen, let's make sure I've got that right. Excellent. And then we move it over. So if I dive into those interactive insights, again, I also might have some slower internet speeds when it takes for loading the Power BI stuff. It does require quite an internet capacity. I'm going to open that up into full screen mode. So the thing that I found really interesting, I was getting really into digging into the research, particularly this week as we were preparing for this webinar, and I went through into that me search and into the free search, and I found it really interesting when I was in this space, kind of thinking about, okay, so what does successful change look like? What does good change look like across the globe? So using this tool up here, I clicked on that meta exceeded project objectives. That means that I was selecting out those projects where it was reported back that they meta exceeded their objectives. And then I was thinking, okay, so what about the project attributes? You know, what was the scope of the change? Was it, and then I can see, if I open up this focus mode, you can see where the most successful changes were, pretty kind of on average by the looks of it for across the research. I can look at the number of impacted employees as well, see what kind of characteristics we have there, see if I can open up that focus mode. There we go. So you can see that as well once it loads. Oh, I think my computer's struggling with loading that one. I'll go back to just the smaller view. The other thing as well that I thought was interesting, if I take that back so that we're just looking back at the research in full again, let me just ensure that I'm also clearing all those filters down. Because I think there's a filter left on there. Oh, I might try and come back into the free search instead. Looks as though it's just needs to be reloaded. Let's try that. Power BI, trying to keep up with me. There we go. I also thought it was interesting to take a look at, say, the different regions and what was, say, the most common changes that were taking place in each region as well. I think that there's so much scope here to take a look at what was going on. So you can see within Europe, most common changes was that IT software upgrade. And that's from 728 respondents, so quite a significant number of respondents coming through. So I think just my encouragement is, if you've got access to this, as Michelle said, you can absolutely get lost in this, finding bits and pieces, bits of information that might help you in the changes that you're working on. Have we got any questions?
I believe we do have a question in the chat, but I think Michelle is just typing an answer, but maybe that might be a question that everyone might benefit from if we answer it live. So this person asks if the report is purchasable for PDF download.
So as far as I understand, there isn't a PDF download, is there, Michelle? I don't think.
No, it's only the in the portal that you can play around with the research, and then at the moment, I think the only way of getting it transferred onto a PowerPoint, for instance, would be to snip the graphs and put it in there. But yes, you unfortunately also need access to the Prosci portal to be able to go into the report.
Fab. That was all I had in terms of content. Michelle, was there anything else that you wanted to bring in?
No, nothing else from my side. Besides saying that if you guys do have access to the Prosci portal and you want to, play around a little bit in there, getting curious, and you get stuck, you're more than welcome to send me an email, and I will easily jump on a quick Zoom chat or a Teams chat with you and show you around and help you to find out what you set out to find out.
I can see we have got a couple of questions through as we've just been talking there. So if you do have access to the portal, you should have access, or you might have access a live subscription. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for Research Hub. If you have that live subscription to Research Hub, then you will have access to this report. Number one takeaway from the report. Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm gonna sidestep that question slightly and say that my number one takeaway from the report is that the way that Prosci have formatted the research this time means that I can, as Michelle showed you, you can see the actual responses from participants, and that then provides a great library and resource for when I'm doing some of my change management work. I've got live, examples. I've got ideas. It's a bank of ideas that I can then go into to take a look at as a change practitioner to utilize. So I think that's probably my number one takeaway from the report, that I get a lot of ideas that I can take back to the changes that I'm working on. Michelle, what about you?
Yeah, I think you're right, Imogen. For me, it definitely is those in participant words sections. Also simply just because it does give you that, that credibility, because I mean, those are the words of the 2,668 other participants that that participated in the study. So they're all change practitioners or change leaders. So you've got those, their words right there for you to leverage and to see what they have to say about specific topics and all of that. So I think for me that is a really great resource to take away from this interactive report. And then also just to see how, in different regions, what is happening in different regions, and how you can maybe use that to improve the change management in your organization or in your region. So I think the main takeaway for me is trying to get the report to work for you. So, and the only way you're going to do that is to actually dig in, play around with it a little bit and see what's interesting and useful to you, for sure.
Fantastic. I can't see any further questions. What I will say is that if you reflect on today's webinar and you have questions that you do want to ask, then don't hesitate to reach out, get in touch. You can reach out on LinkedIn, either to the Prosci Europe page, or to either Michelle or I directly. Or if you've got our emails, then you're more than welcome to email us as well. Thank you very much for all taking the time to come along today. I hope you found it really informative and a useful introduction to the latest edition of Prosci's Best Practices report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Imogen. Yeah, and just before we wrap up, if you have been to any of our webinars before, you'll know about the final poll that we run at the end. So I'll just launch that now. Obviously, I know we have a lot of practitioners on the call, but if you're not already certified and you're interested in becoming certified, which obviously gives you access to the full research, then tick either of the boxes. So if you are just interested in attending one of our public programs as an individual, obviously you just tick that box for change management training for me. If you're interested in maybe organizing training within your organization, then of course the second option is the one to tick there. If you're interested in any of the other offerings that we have, any other solutions, one-day workshops, things like that, that all comes under this. What we just do here is just find out initially if you're interested in training just for yourself or for your organization. So if that is something that you've been thinking about, then just tick one of those boxes there. And then I'll obviously pass your details on to one of our colleagues, and they'll be following up with you probably early part of next week, just to discuss with you what it is that what solution probably is best for you, what you're interested in, find out a little bit more, and then obviously to provide you with any more information that you might require before taking the next step. So yeah, just take either of those options and we'll follow up with you shortly after that. And then just finally, just to say, obviously this, if you have been following our public webinars since August, this is now the final public webinar of the series. As Imogen mentioned at the start, if you are a Prosci certified practitioner on the call today, you may have already seen an invite come through to our alumni webinar, which is taking place on the 24th, and Michelle will be there for that one with our colleague Kerry, one of our other instructors. So yeah, please do join us for that. Keep an eye out for that invite. So yeah, and of course, if you're not already a Prosci certified practitioner, that's maybe encouragement for you to become one, because that is what you get access to following training. We do run these alumni webinars, so to provide you obviously support after training. So that's just one of the offerings that you get after training as well. So yeah, if you are a certified practitioner, then yeah, keep an eye out for that invite, where we will be taking a deeper dive into the research. So we're through some of the highlights today, but Kerry and Michelle will be taking an even deeper dive into the research, as everyone on the call will have access to the research. So we'll dive deeper there on the 24th. So hope to see as many practitioners there as possible. In terms of future public webinars, we'll probably be taking a break now this side of Christmas, New Year. So keep an eye out early part of next year for our next run of public webinars. But yeah, if you have joined us throughout the current series, then yeah, really great to see you for that. What I will mention, I've seen some comments into the chat there. So depending on where you are in the world, so the one on the 24th is for UK alumni, Prosci alumni. There is a separate webinar for alumni in Singapore. So if you're based in Singapore and you've joined us today and you're an alumni, there's a different date for that one, but you should also get an invite for that one as well at some point as well. So just to make that a bit clearer as well. So yeah, get you all back to your Fridays. Thanks very much for joining us. Hope to see you on another webinar soon, and hope to see you on some of our training sessions as well. So yeah, thanks very much, Imogen. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for your time today. Yeah, hope everyone has a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend.